In the years when storms gathered over the frontiers of Europe and rumors spread faster than riders on the old trade roads, people whispered of two threats approaching from opposite horizons. One was an army of flesh and steel, relentless and unstoppable, riding under banners that fluttered like black wings across the steppe. The other was a presence older than any kingdom, older even than the faiths men clung to for comfort. It was said to sleep beneath mountains, locked away centuries before any living soul took their first breath. And though it stirred rarely, the earth always felt the tremor when it did. This story begins at the moment when those two threats unknowingly moved toward each other, as if drawn by the same inevitable thread. At the edge of the Carpathian Mountains, a young woman named Selene rode alone. Her cloak snapped in the wind, and her breath came out in slow fog clouds. She had abandoned her family, her status, and her reputation to escape the Shadow Order, a hidden, forbidden group of mystics who practiced rituals older than scripture and more dangerous than any weapon crafted by man. These rituals were once meant to guard the imprisoned darkness slumbering under the mountains. But desperation had twisted the order, turning guardians into supplicants and their chants into invitations for the darkness to return. Selene had seen the truth too late. She had participated in the early rites, forced by her family's ambitions, bound by her brother's threats, manipulated by a prince who cared more for power than survival. And though she had tried to oppose them, her rebellion had fractured the ritual chamber, awakened something vast, and thrown the order into chaos. When she escaped into the forest, she believed she had left the worst behind. But the world outside had changed. Birds flew in frantic spirals before falling motionless to the ground. Streams reflected the sky the wrong way, as if showing another world entirely. Shadows moved against the sun's command. Still, she rode, determined to reach someone who would listen. Far away, crossing rugged passes with thousands of riders under his command, Altan Borchu advanced with the Mongol armies. He was young for a general, but his mind was sharp, his instincts honed, and his loyalty unshakable. Kings and princes feared the Mongols because of their speed and discipline. Yet Altan sensed something else ahead, something not born of strategy or steel. His scouts brought back strange reports describing European soldiers who fought without breath, without pain, without even a heartbeat. Altan did not dismiss these stories. He felt the mountains watching him, felt the earth's tremors beneath the hooves of his horse. The familiar world was shifting in ways that defied understanding. Even the horses sensed it, refusing to graze near certain rocks, tossing their heads at trees that seemed to lean in unnatural shapes. As the armies advanced, Selene's path descended into a ruined valley. She paused when she saw abandoned carts overturned along the road. Pots still hung from cooking racks. Blankets lay folded. Toys were scattered as if dropped by children only moments ago. But there were no people, only silence. The unnatural, unnerving silence that can swallow a village whole. Selene dismounted and walked among the empty houses. She felt the world holding its breath. The wind did not move. The trees did not sway. And when she stepped into the village square, she saw a figure sitting beneath the old oak tree, a child. At first, she thought the child was asleep, but when the wind shifted, only for a heartbeat, she saw the truth. The child had no shadow. Selene's breath caught. The absence of a shadow meant something had claimed part of the soul, leaving only the shell behind. She approached slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can you hear me?" The child turned their head, eyes too wide, too still. When they spoke, their voice sounded layered, chiming with an echo not meant for human throats. "You opened the door." Selene staggered backward. "I didn't mean to." The child blinked slowly. "We walked through." Before she could ask more, the child dissolved into pale shafts of light, as if unmaking itself into drifting fragments. The pieces floated upward, disappearing into the morning sky. Selene collapsed to her knees. Her hands trembled. She pressed them against her face, forcing herself to steady her breathing. The abyss had not risen, but something else had slipped through. Something curious, something hungry. She stood slowly and mounted her horse again, knowing she had no choice but to continue. She had to warn the nearest castle, nearest court, nearest authority that would listen. But even as she rode, she sensed she was not alone. Something followed her, not in the trees, not on the road, but in the folds between sound and silence. Meanwhile, Altan's army reached the remains of a burned forest. The trees were charred, not from flame, but from something that had burned inside them, as if heat had blossomed from their cores. Smoke no longer rose, but the air smelled of ash and iron. Altan walked between the trunks, touching the bark with the back of his hand. It was cold, too cold. His lieutenant approached him. "General, there were no footprints, no bodies, not even birds." Altan nodded. "The world here is wrong." That night, the Mongols made camp. Fires crackled, but the warmth felt hollow. The horses paced restlessly. Warriors whispered of spirits. Altan could not sleep. He stared at the mountains, knowing instinctively that something waited for him there. And he was right. Hours before dawn, his scouts captured a woman wandering near the ridge, weak, trembling, eyes wide with terror. When she was brought before him, Altan recognized immediately that she was not a simple villager. She was marked by ritual, marked by the order, marked by the darkness. "Who are you?" Altan asked. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Someone who knows what's coming." Altan studied the woman in silence, noting the faint tremor in her hands, the hollow look in her eyes, the weight she carried as though the night itself clung to her skin. She stood with her shoulders drawn tightly inward, as if bracing against an unseen force. When the guards released her, she swayed slightly, steadying herself with a hand against a tree trunk. Her cloak was torn. Her boots were caked with dried mud. And on her wrist, he saw a faint rune, almost invisible, a symbol pressed into the skin by ritual ink that once glowed in candlelit caverns. "You came from the mountains?" Altan asked. Her eyes flicked toward the peaks behind them. "Yes. What happened there?" Her voice thinned to a whisper. "Everything we tried to contain is waking." The surrounding warriors shifted uneasily. One murmured a prayer. Another touched a charm tied to his belt. Altan raised a hand for silence. Fear, if allowed to spread, would unravel them before the true enemy ever reached their lines. He turned back to the woman. "Your name?" "Selene. And why were you alone?" She hesitated. "Because the others didn't survive." Altan gestured for food and water. Selene accepted both, though her hands trembled as she lifted the flask. He waited until she had taken a few slow sips before speaking again. "You said something is waking. Explain." She closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. "There is an ancient force sleeping beneath the Carpathians. My order was meant to guard it. Long ago, they created rituals that kept the seal intact. But over time, desperation poisoned their purpose. They tried to use those same rituals as weapons." She opened her eyes. "They failed." Altan felt the wind shift as she spoke, cool air brushing the edges of the firelight. Her words carried weight, but it was the quiet conviction in her voice that struck him most. She wasn't telling a story to gain favor. She was recounting something that had branded itself onto her soul. "What kind of force?" he asked. Selene looked at him steadily. "Not a spirit, not a demon. A presence that unravels what it touches, a hunger without form. It whispers in the dark, waiting for cracks in the seal. And we gave it more than cracks." Her voice faltered. The fire crackled softly between them. Altan felt a faint tightening in his chest. He had expected an explanation steeped in superstition, something he could dismiss, but nothing in her tone smelled of madness. She breathed slowly. "The rituals built to imprison it rely on balance, but ours were performed with fear and anger." The seal twisted. Shadows slipped through. Altan weighed her words carefully. "You speak of shadows as if they are alive." "They are," she replied, "alive in a way that does not belong to our world." His scouts exchanged glances. The memory of their earlier reports returned. Strange movements in the forest, figures glimpsed between trees, silence where sound should have lived. "What do these shadows want?" he asked. Her answer came without hesitation. "To learn and to feed, but not on flesh and not on blood." Altan frowned. "Then on what?" Selene looked into the darkness beyond the fire. "On the pieces of us we cannot see." She shivered. He didn't need to ask what she meant. He had seen enough battle to recognize fear, but the fear in her eyes ran deeper, as if carved by something that did not understand mercy or borders or the natural laws of human existence. When the seal cracked, she continued, something moved through it, something small, something curious. It follows the warmth of life. Altan leaned forward slightly. You saw it? Yes, a child without a shadow. The murmurs returned instantly. Superstitions ran deep among the warriors. A missing shadow meant an untethered soul, a curse, an omen. Selene continued. The child did not speak with its own voice. It spoke with a layered echo, something wearing the shape of innocence only because that shape was nearby. It was not dangerous by intention. It did not understand danger, but everything around it died. Altan's jaw tightened. How? It didn't kill. It simply walked. And where it walked, life unraveled. She wrapped her arms around herself. The village I passed today was full of bodies without shadows. They died without wounds, without struggle, without sound. Snow began to fall softly, flakes drifting through the air like fragments of frozen breath. They landed silently on Selene's cloak, on the frost-hard ground, on the fires that hissed at the sudden cold. Altan rose slowly, stepping toward the darkness outside the camp. His warriors stood alert, following his gaze. Something in the trees felt wrong. The snowfall muffled every sound except their breathing. In the distance, a faint rustle. Not animal, not wind. Soft, rhythmic. Bare feet on snow. Selene stiffened. It followed me here. Altan's hand rested on the hilt of his blade, not because he believed a weapon could stop such a thing, but because instinct demanded it. The rustling grew closer, deliberate and slow. Warriors raised their bows. Horses snorted and shuffled backward, sensing something no human eye could yet see. Then the sound stopped. Altan stared into the tree line. Nothing moved, but the air changed, thickened, like the moment before lightning touches the ground. Selene whispered, "Do not step forward. It does not understand distance, or boundaries, or fear." A shape flickered between the trees. A small silhouette, childlike, unmoving, watching. Altan felt the cold settle into his veins. The figure raised its head slowly. Selene stepped backward, gripping the edge of Altan's coat. "Do not speak to it. Do not acknowledge it." The figure tilted its head, mirroring Selena's movement. Then it took one step forward. Its foot did not disturb the snow. No shadow followed. Altan whispered, "If it is not alive, what is it?" Selene answered softly, "A question, one the darkness asked us." The figure dissolved into drifting flecks of pale light, vanishing as silently as the snowfall that swallowed its presence. The forest returned to stillness, but the silence left behind felt heavier than any scream. Selene exhaled unsteadily. "It knows you now." Altan looked at her sharply. "Me?" "It watches those who stand nearest to the seal's break. You touch that place with your steps. It remembers your warmth." Altan didn't respond. The fire behind him crackled. Warriors looked at him with fear they tried to hide. Selene continued, "You cannot outrun it. You can only understand it before it understands you." Altan turned to her, jaw set. "Then teach me." She met his gaze, tired, burdened, but determined. "We ride at dawn." Dawn rose over the Mongol encampment as a thin strip of gray light pushing back the night. It was not a confident sunrise. Rather, it crept over the horizon like something uncertain if it still belonged in this world. Altan and Selene stood side by side, silent in the cold morning air. Though the warriors around them busied themselves preparing horses and tightening saddles, an unspoken heaviness lingered among them, a sense that the night had left something behind. Selene mounted her horse first. Her movements were stiff. Exhaustion clung to her, but her eyes carried a clarity Altan had not seen before, an acceptance of what must be done, what must be faced, even if the path was dark. Altan joined her with a slow exhale, settling into the saddle as if readying himself for the final chapter of a story he never meant to enter. They rode away from the camp as the first hints of gold touched the sky. No escort followed, not because Altan had not ordered one, but because every soldier who met Selene's gaze found a reason to turn away. Fear had settled deep inside them, and fear makes cowards of even the bravest. The forest was quiet as they traveled. Too quiet. A silence that felt as though the world itself was listening. Selene finally broke it. The child thing learned from me. It learned from my presence, from my breath, from my memories. That was my fault. But now it has seen your army. Altan nodded, jaw clenched. Then we cannot stay here, nor can we march. You must return east. Tell your Khan the truth. Warn him. And leave Europe to fall? Altan asked. Selene looked ahead. Not fall, adapt, survive. The abyss is sealed for now, but the things that slip through are not monsters. They are unfinished things, learning things, curious things. They mimic, they reshape, they change whatever they observe. And if they learn from armies, kingdoms, and wars, they will become something far more dangerous. The path narrowed as they approached a cliff overlooking a vast valley. Snow fell lightly, dusting the landscape in pale white. Below, a line of old fortifications stretched like broken teeth across the ridge, relics from past conflicts. This is where Selene stopped. Altan halted beside her. Why here? Because this is where we part, she said softly, and where this story ends. Altan dismounted, reading the finality in her tone. You intend to face whatever came through the seal alone. I do, she replied. I must. It followed me. It responds to me. I am its first imprint. If I vanish into the east, it will follow me there. If I hide, it will search. But if I confront it, if I show it boundaries, it may learn them. Altan shook his head. You do not know that. I do, Selene whispered, because it spoke with my voice. A gust of cold wind swept past them, carrying the faintest echo of that layered whisper. Altan felt the weight of inevitability tighten around them. This was the path fate had carved long before they met, perhaps even before they were born. Come with me, he said suddenly. It was not a command, not a plea, something in between. She smiled sadly. If I ride beside you, I doom your empire. And if you follow me, you doom yourself. You survived the mountain. Do not throw that survival away. Altan looked at her as though memorizing her face, every line, every shadow, every scar that told the story of what she had endured. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Nothing felt worthy. Nothing felt enough. Selene reached for his hand. For a long moment, they simply held each other's gaze as the snow drifted around them. Two enemies who had become allies. Two strangers who had become connected by something deeper than war. Then she released him and turned toward the valley. At first, Altan saw nothing. Then a shape emerged, soft, pale, childlike, walking across the snow without leaving prints. It came alone at first, but only at first. Behind it, drifting like pale smoke, came other shapes, faint outlines, unfinished bodies, faces without features. They moved quietly, curious and unhurried, as if exploring a world they barely understood. Selene stepped forward to meet them. Altan reached for his sword, but she raised a hand. No, let them see me. The child shape stopped several paces away, its head tilted in that strange, too slow motion. And when it spoke, its voice curled through the air like frost. You came back. Selene steadied herself. Yes, I came to teach you. The pale shapes behind it pulsed softly, almost like breathing. What will you teach us? The child asked. Selene's voice shook, but she held firm. Limits. The shapes trembled. We do not know that word. You will, she said, but you must follow me. Not the armies, not the villages. Me. We followed your warmth, the child whispered. We follow what wakes us. Then follow it this way, she said, stepping backward into the valley, away from the world of men. The child shape took a step toward her, and another and another. The pale form shifted in rhythm, gliding behind it in eerie silence. Altan felt his heart hammering. Selene! She did not turn. She only lifted a hand in farewell, a gesture gentle as snowfall, a gesture final as closing eyes. Then she walked deeper into the valley. The shapes followed. their forms fading gradually into the swirling curtain of morning snow until only faint glimmers remained, like drifting embers, like evaporating breath, like souls unclaimed. Altan watched until the last trace disappeared, until the valley swallowed everything, until only the wind remained. He felt a hollowness grow in his chest, a slow, heavy ache he could not place, the ache of a world forever changed, the ache of a connection cut just as it began. When the snow settled, he mounted his horse. The sun rose over the horizon, turning the world gold. And Altan rode east, not as a conqueror, but as a witness, with a story to tell his Khan, with a warning to deliver, with a weight he would carry for the rest of his life. Behind him, the valley lay quiet. No footprints, no shadows, only the faint residue of something learning to exist. And far beneath the mountains, sealed but dreaming, the crowned abyss stirred, aware, patient, waiting for an age when the world was no longer ready. The story ended there, but its echo would travel across generations, not in prophecy, not in scripture, but in the quiet places where shadows fall strange, and in the footsteps of beings who walk without leaving any behind.